My dad forgot to hang up the phone. I heard every word. It's time to get him out of that house. My chest went cold, my ears rang. They weren't talking about some random tenant, they were talking about me. That house was worth $890,000, and it was the last piece of my mother I had left. I didn't say a word, I waited, I planned, and when he came home from his business trip smiling like nothing had changed, he slipped the key into the lock. It didn't fit. On the doorstep sat a single envelope. He opened it and the smile fell off his face. Then he started screaming, "Before I share my story, I'd love to know you are here with me and listening to me. Comment hi below or tell me where you're from. I love hearing how far my story reaches. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes all the difference. Thank you. And now let me tell you everything. If you want to hear more true stories like mine, stories of betrayal, justice, and taking back your life, please subscribe to this channel. It helps me keep sharing, and it means the world to know someone cares. My name is Atticus, and this is how I took back my home. Monday night in early spring carried that cool, forgiving breeze that only Austin seems to know. From the cracked open window in my living room, I could hear faint laughter from somewhere down the street, carried on the wind from Zilker Park. The scent of cut grass and blooming jasmine mingled with the lingering warmth of the oven. As I slid out the last slice of leftover pizza, the Hyde Park house felt too quiet, too still. I sat alone on the couch, feet on the hardwood floors I'd installed with my own hands years ago, and let my eyes drift toward the bay window where Mom used to read with a cup of tea. The granite counters in the kitchen caught the lamplight, the same ones Mom had insisted on. "It looks like sunshine caught in stone," she'd said. My phone lit up. "Dad," I answered, and Harlan's voice came through with that easy charm I'd grown up trusting. He said he was in Dallas with Tatum, his new wife, and that things were going well. We exchanged a few lines, then he signed off with, "Talk soon, son." The call ended, or so I thought. The line stayed open. I heard shuffling, a muffled laugh that wasn't Tatum's, and then his voice, sharper, stripped of any warmth. "Time to get Atticus out of that house. He's unemployed, he's a burden." Tatum's voice followed, casual as if discussing whether that place could sell for $890,000 easy, enough to put down on Lake Travis. Then a third voice. I recognized Damon Voss, Dad's business partner. "Market's hot right now. Don't give him time to figure it out." Something in my chest cracked. My heart punched against my ribs. I stared at the framed photo of Mama Lara on the mantel, her gentle smile like a lifeline and a knife all at once. My mind split in two. Part of me wanted to hit end call and scream into the phone. The other half urged silence. "Listen, learn." I leaned back, eyes still locked on Mom's photo. I remembered 2015, both of us in work boots, eating instant noodles on overturned buckets while we built this place. Her voice, warm but firm. "It's in your name. Don't let anyone take it." The papers were clear. The house was mine. Mom's will had made sure of that. I'd paid Dad's $50,000 debt when his business went under in 2023, fixed his car for another $3,000, and opened my door to him and Tatum for a few months after their wedding. Months had stretched into years. My hand tightened around my phone. I didn't call back. I didn't confront him. Instead, I opened my notes app and typed, "If they want the house, they'll have to read my letter first." The game had changed. I was no longer the quiet, obedient son. I was in control now, and I would play this in silence. Mom's photo seemed to watch me, the bay window framing her memory like a warning. The open line on my phone whispered the truth I hadn't wanted to hear, and I knew exactly what I had to do. Morning sunlight spilled over Zilker Park, gilding the edges of the grass as I walked the familiar path. A busker strummed a weathered guitar under the oaks, and for a moment I was 12 again, holding Mom's hand as she led me to the weekly outdoor concerts. Those afternoons had been simple: music, picnic blankets, and the feeling that family meant safety. But safety had a way of eroding. My thoughts drifted to 2015. Mom and I lived lean, eating instant noodles for weeks while saving for the materials to build the house. I installed the hardwood floors myself, my knees aching for days. She picked the granite counters, pale gold streaks through gray like trapped sunlight. Then 2023 hit, Dad's business collapsed, and I pulled $50,000 from my savings to clear his debts. When his BMW's transmission failed, I paid $3,000 to fix it. When he and Tatum married, I offered them my guest room, just until they found a place. They never left. By the time I returned home from the park, my mind was still. I pulled down the cedar box from the top shelf of my closet, the one Mom had labeled in her careful handwriting, "House and Will." Inside were the deeds, the inheritance papers, the building contracts. Every one of them had my name, not his. I needed more than documents. I needed clarity. I dialed Jonah Lee, one of Dad's oldest friends. "Did Dad say anything to you about selling my house?" I asked. Jonah hesitated. He mentioned Lake Travis once or twice, but I thought he was joking. I could hear the uncertainty in his tone, but there was something else. the way people talk when they know more than they're saying. Later, rummaging through Mom's old folders, I found a small digital recorder tucked in an envelope. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, warm but edged with warning, if the day comes when your father asks for too much, don't be ashamed to say no. It hit me like a commandment. I called Jonah again, pushing harder. That's when he told me Dad had bragged to a few friends that it would only take a couple of weeks to get Atticus out, and that the buyers already put money down, so the clock had already started. I sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the streaks of gold in the granite, and typed a new line into my notes. No arguments, act legal, act fast, act silent. Mom had taught me how to build a home, now she was teaching me how to defend it, even from the man who'd once helped raise me. The bay window framed the morning light, but I saw only the shadow of what was coming, and I would be ready. By late afternoon, South Congress was in full swing, music bleeding from open doorways, bus brakes sighing, the sun sliding down the brick faces of old storefronts. I cut through the noise and ducked into Brews and Brews, long enough to grab a coffee, then crossed to the narrow elevator that took me up to Reed Fisher's office. The waiting room smelled like leather and copier heat. Reed's door was half open. He waved me in. He didn't waste time. I laid out the files, the will, the deed, the builder's contract with my name on every page. He scanned the tops of documents, pausing only to circle a filing number with a pen. It's yours, he said, meeting my eyes over the paperwork. Sole owner. Your father has no legal standing to sell, evict, or encumber it. If he tries, he'll run into a wall. A wall was good, but a plan was better. Reed leaned back, fingers steepled. I'm going to make a few recommendations. First, change the locks if you feel unsafe or if you believe anyone might act without your consent. Second, avoid any confrontations. Put everything in writing. Third, if you decide to sell, you run the process, you choose the agent, and the proceeds move into an account that is yours alone. His certainty steadied me in a way sleep hadn't managed. In months, I nodded, folded the papers back into their envelope, and asked the question sitting heavy in my throat. If they threatened to throw me out, he slid a business card across the desk. Call me and document everything, dates, times, words, keep your steps clean. Outside, the street felt louder, brighter, a little less friendly. I took my coffee back to a table in the corner, and opened notes on my phone. I typed a title and left it bold at the top, the rule of silence, no arguments, no explanations, write everything down, move fast. Under that, I outlined the work like tasks in a sprint: find an agent, set price, schedule inspection, change locks, add cameras, rent a storage unit, open a new bank account, book movers. I could almost hear Mom's voice nudging me along, not unkindly, but firm, like she had her hand at the small of my back, guiding me to a better lane. Dusk fell while I drove home, a warm smear of color over Mopac. The house met me with its familiar hush. I set the envelope on the kitchen island, and was halfway to the sink when I saw the tablet. Tatum's iPad was lying face up beside the fruit bowl, its screen awake, the mail app open on a draft that read Hyde Park draft listing. I didn't touch the screen. I didn't need to. The first lines were big enough to read: 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, hardwood floors, bay window, granite counters, built in 2015. There were thumbnails of sample staging photos, and a line at the bottom in gray: Damon has a fast buyer. Heat crawled up the back of my neck. I turned away from the tablet, and stared into the dark window over the sink until my reflection steadied. The listing wasn't a plan, it was a schedule. I backed up, careful not to brush the glass, and pulled my phone again. In notes under rule of silence, I added a subhead: time pressure. Then I wrote what the draft had already told me: they are moving now. I took the envelope to the bedroom, slid it under a locked drawer, and opened Mom's cedar box again to double-check the copies. Every page I touched felt like a handhold. The next item was money. I scrolled to the number for David Morrison, a bank manager I knew who treated people like they were more than account numbers. He picked up on the second ring. Atticus, been a minute. I need a new account, I said, separate, no linked addresses. I'd like to set it up tomorrow. We can do that, he said. We'll put privacy notes on it. Come by in the morning, afternoon, I said, thinking of what needed to happen first. I'll call before I head over. When I hung up, the kitchen looked different, not hostile, just no longer a place to linger. I grabbed a pen from the junk drawer, and wrote the rule of silence at the top of a clean sheet of paper, then bullet-pointed the steps again, the way I needed to see them with ink on paper. I folded that page and tucked it into my wallet. The last thing I did was text an agent. A friend of a friend had mentioned Blaine Connor months ago. Someone who knew Hyde Park like a chessboard. I found the number and typed, "Can we meet in the morning? Coffee near South Congress. I want to talk about selling. Price target $890,000. Cash if possible, 10 days. He responded before I could set the phone down. 8 a.m., Brews and Brews. I'll be there. I washed my coffee mug, and set it upside down to dry, the way Mom used to, edges aligned just so. I checked the bay window latch and the deadbolt, walked the hall, and paused in front of her. Photo before turning out the light. Somewhere in Dallas, people were making plans around a kitchen table that wasn't theirs, in a house they would never own. Here in the quiet I protected, I made mine. The line on my phone had gone dead hours ago, but it felt like it was still humming in the air. I listened to it, and slept with my shoes by the door. I got to Brews 10 minutes early, and took a seat by the front window where the sun warmed the table. The barista pulled shots in a quick rhythm, laptops opened and snapped shut, cyclists clipped in and out, leaving tracks of road grit on the floor. Blaine strode in on time, tall and alert, a navy blazer over a t-shirt that said he belonged in both a boardroom and a garage. You must be Atticus. His handshake was dry and sure. Tell me exactly what you want. I want to sell fast, I said. No drama, cash if we can, 10 days. The price is $890,000. He didn't blink. Hyde Park, right, houses don't sit there. I've got someone hunting. In that pocket, tech money, clean paperwork, pays on time. We'll need photos today, inspection within 48 hours. If the buyer is who I think it is, we could be signing a contract by the end of the week. It sounded like a plan made for the version of me I needed to be. I nodded. Keep it quiet. I don't want any chatter in the neighborhood. No signs, of course. He tapped notes into his phone, then looked up. Mind if I ask why the rush? It's just time, I said. He seemed to understand that boundary, and didn't push. For a moment, the window flickered with a memory. 2015, me and Mom on this same strip after a supply run, eating tacos on the curb with sawdust in our hair. She had pointed north with her chin, and said, Hyde Park is about to take off. You built in the right place. I'd laughed, telling her I picked the lot because she liked the pecan tree in the yard. She'd shrugged. If you ever have to start over, this house can be your runway. Back in the present. Blaine scrolled through his contacts. Something funny, he said. Last week, a guy called me asking about a place that sounded a lot like yours, claimed it was his relatives, needed to move it quickly. Name was Damon. He glanced at me, measuring my reaction. Damon Voss. I felt my jaw set, the way it does when you brace in a storm. I know the name, I said, and wrote it in my pocket notebook. Then I closed the notebook, as if I just put a lid on something hot. Photos this afternoon work, he asked. Yes. I'll schedule a walkthrough with the buyer for day after tomorrow, he said. I'll text you the time. We'll keep everyone's footprints light. When we stood to leave, I felt the ground tilt toward momentum. Outside, South Congress rattled with buses and scooters. I called Jonah from the curb, because I wanted to hear how fast rumors were moving. I'm selling, I said. I wanted you to hear it from me. There was a silence, long enough for me to picture where he was. Maybe his truck, maybe the bench outside the hardware store he loved. Are you sure? He asked. That's a big step. I'm sure. He exhaled a tired sound. Your dad's coming back earlier than planned. Could be tonight. He mentioned wrapping Dallas sooner. I don't know what he's thinking, but it felt urgent. The word landed like a warning. The checklists in my head rearranged themselves with a snap. Locks that should have been changed yesterday. Boxes that should already be on a dolly. I thanked Jonah, and ended the call. On the corner, an amplified guitar chased a melody that didn't quite settle, like the city was tuning itself for a show it hadn't announced. I moved fast. At home, I opened the kitchen drawer, and pulled out the written sheet labeled The Rule of Silence, smoothing it on the counter as if it were a map. Find an agent, done. Set price, done. Schedule inspection, in motion. That left the hard boundaries, locks, cameras, storage, bank. The house watched me pack its rooms, absorbing each decision without comment. I gathered the things that were mine, and with equal care the things that weren't. Dad's suits, Tatum's boxes of seasonal decor, the framed certificates he'd never hung. I labeled them. I stacked them by the door. It felt like triage. This stays, that goes. This is history with a key attached. The iPad still lay where it had last night, asleep now, as harmless as any Black Mirror. I covered it with a dish towel before I left the room. Back in the living room, I set Mom's photo on the mantel, and stepped away as if to check the frame was straight. It was. The bay window threw rectangles of late morning light onto the floorboards. My chest felt tight, but my hands were steady. I took out my phone, and opened a new message. Eddie, this is Atticus Kane. Can you come by this afternoon to change out the front, back, and garage locks? The response came fast. I can be there by 3, perfect. I glanced at the clock, then at the list in my wallet. There was still time to rent a storage unit, still time to call David to confirm the new account, still time to keep every step inside the fence of the law. I tucked the photo of Mom back where it belonged, and straightened my shoulders. The first piece had moved. The board was mine to play. The afternoon light spilled through the bay window, warming the hardwood floor I had sanded myself a decade earlier. I'd barely had time to set my bag down before Eddie Malone's battered van pulled up. He climbed the porch steps with a box of hardware under one arm, and a grin that carried more years than his lined face. "Somebody wanted this place buttoned up," he said, giving the deadbolt a practice tug. His brows rose. "Whoever put this in knew what they were doing. Not an amateur's work. Change everything," I told him. "Front, back, garage, new codes, physical keys, no spares anywhere else." He whistled low, got to work, and by the time he finished, the air smelled faintly of oil and cold metal. He handed me a small envelope, every key accounted for. "You're the only one holding these now, keep it that way." I drove straight to Austin Storage. The fluorescent-lit office smelled of cardboard and lemon cleaner. The woman behind the counter barely looked up as I signed the lease, for a unit big enough to hold every stick of furniture that didn't belong to me. I walked the empty space, the metal door rattling in its frame, and imagined the echo of my father's voice bouncing off bare walls. Back home, I started in the kitchen, methodically pulling their dishes, gadgets, and cookware from cabinets. That's when I saw it, an envelope lying beside the coffee maker. Not yet sealed. The bank's logo glared at me from the corner. "Loan pre-approval, Lake Travis property." Under the printed lines and neat black ink were two names, Harlan Kane and Tatum Reed. My pulse beat hard in my throat. They had already gone to a lender, and my house, my mother's house, was the silent guarantor. I set it aside, and drove to the electronics store, returning with two cameras, one for the front door, one for the kitchen. The bay window's light faded to gold as I mounted the kitchen unit high in a corner, tucked just enough into the shadows to avoid notice. A test ping lit my phone. The feed was crisp, the microphone clear. Later, sitting at my desk, my email pinged again. The address was unfamiliar, the subject blank. The message read, "Atticus, they won't stop, don't trust anyone, not even Jonah." No signature, no clue who had sent it. I leaned back, letting the words settle into the quiet. The walls felt closer somehow. There was more than one game in motion here, and I was no longer sure how many players the board held. The new locks clicked behind me as I set the security system for the night. Tomorrow the investor would walk through these rooms, and the cameras would start recording every shadow. I told myself I was ready. Morning light broke clean across the granite counters, and I moved a cloth in slow circles over a faint watermark until it vanished. The air felt sharp, charged, like the space before a summer storm. Blaine arrived first, crisp in a navy blazer, the kind of man who could sell a house with his smile alone. He brought Michael Trent, a quiet, sharply observant man in jeans and a pale button-down. Michael's gaze lingered on the bay window, the grain of the hardwood floors. "You've kept the character," he said, and I nodded once, keeping my words to a minimum. They moved through the rooms, Blaine narrating features, Michael absorbing every detail. We were halfway through the upstairs hall when the doorbell rang. Jonah stood there, a polite half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Was in the neighborhood," he said. His gaze slid past me to Blaine's folder, and the stranger walking the house. He stepped inside when I didn't move to block him, his presence unsettling the air like a sudden draft. In the garage, Michael examined the wiring, while my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number: "They'll be home sooner than you think, tonight." The clipped wording, the lack of punctuation, it matched the email from 2 nights ago. By the time Michael returned to the kitchen, he was ready to move. "I want it," he said. "Let's put something in writing now." Blaine produced a short agreement, promised to sell, cash in 10 days, funds wired to the account I'd opened 2 days earlier. He gave me the smallest nod, and I signed, the pen scratching against the paper like a quiet verdict. Jonah stood near the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching with the stillness of someone who was both a witness and a messenger. I didn't look at him when I slid the signed pages back to Blaine. When they left, I locked the door, and pulled out my phone. The kitchen camera feed showed sunlight streaming over the empty counters, a picture of calm that belied the storm circling closer. Tonight, they'd walk back into this house, believing they still held its reins. I slipped the phone into my pocket, and murmured to the empty room, "We'll see who's in control." By mid-afternoon, the air in Hyde Park was thick with August heat, the kind that clung to your shirt and slowed every movement. I rented a small box truck from a lot off Airport Boulevard, its interior smelling faintly of oil and dust. In the driveway, I began carrying out every trace of Harlan and Tatum, clothing in garment bags, framed photographs I'd never been in, and mismatched kitchenware they'd insisted on keeping here. I sorted it all into neat piles. Clothing to the left, papers and bankers' boxes, decorative pieces wrapped in old linens. Each item felt like I was stripping a layer of history from the walls. Not my history, just the residue of theirs. Halfway through, Mrs. Harlow from across the street appeared at the end of the drive, leaning on her cane. "Does your father know you're doing this?" she asked. I kept my voice even. "He will." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I saw Tatum here last week with Damon. They were measuring out by the fence." Her words hit like a cold hand at the back of my neck. Measuring meant plans, serious ones. when I stopped home between trips, the kitchen camera log showed a 5-minute gap earlier that day, no footage, no audio. I hadn't been home during that time, everything was in place, but the interruption was enough to tell me someone had been inside. At dusk, my phone rang, David Morrison from the bank. There's been a request to verify ownership of your property. He said, from a Damon Voss. We refused, but you should know they're looking for an angle. Minutes later, another email arrived from the same anonymous address as before. Don't be in the house when they come, watch from a distance. By the time the last load was locked inside the unit at Austin Storage, I'd made my decision. Tonight, I'd be at Sunset Manor, with nothing between me and them but 2 lenses and a steady internet connection. It felt like tightening a rope around something that had fought me for years. I just hoped the knot would hold. Before leaving, I placed a single envelope in the middle of the kitchen table, angled the camera directly at it, and walked out without looking back. Night settled over the city in shades of blue and amber. I sat in my new apartment at Sunset Manor, laptop open, both camera feeds live. One screen showed the front porch, bathed in the glow of the street lamp. The other framed the kitchen table and its lone envelope. Beside me, a bottle of my mother's 2018 Bordeaux waited, unopened, the corkscrew resting against the label. At 9:14 p.m., the front camera caught the headlights of a rideshare pulling away. Harland and Tatum came into view, each dragging a suitcase. Harland looked freshly sunburned, grinning as if the house itself would welcome him home. Tatum wore a tailored skirt and jacket, her expression already taut. Harland tried his key first, nothing, then the code, still nothing. His grin faltered. From the audio, Tatum's voice snapped through. When did you change the locks? Harland shook his head. Impossible, this is my house. They moved out of frame. And seconds later the kitchen feed flared as Tatum hoisted herself through the back window. Catching her skirt on the latch, she landed, straightened, and saw the envelope. Harland joined her moments later. The microphone caught the sound of paper tearing. My voice in print spoke for me. Harland, Tatum, I heard your entire plan to remove me. This house has been sold for $890,000. The funds are mine. Your belongings are in Unit 204 at Austin Storage. The code is enclosed. You called me a burden. Consider this your lesson, Atticus. Harland's voice rose into a raw shout. $890,000, ours. Tatum spun on him. Lake Travis is gone, Damon's out of work, and you believed he could handle this. Harland froze. What do you mean out of work? You didn't know, she said, almost laughing. The cracks in their alliance widened, the air between them sharp as glass. Then Harland, pacing, blurted out, it was all for that loan. I was going to use this house as collateral, then sell it after. I leaned back in my chair, letting the confession soak into the audio file now stored in my cloud account. It was more than emotion, it was proof. On the kitchen feed, they sank into the old sofa my mother had chosen, their faces turned away from each other, the envelope limp in Harland's hand. The room seemed smaller around them. I reached for the Bordeaux, poured a measure into the glass, and held it up to the glow of the screen. It wasn't victory in the way I'd once imagined, but it was justice enough for now. When the glass was half empty, I closed the laptop, the image of them collapsing into silence fading into black. End of round 1, I said quietly, and the apartment held the words like a promise. Morning light in Sunset Manor had a clean, almost fragile quality, spilling across the small dining table where my laptop sat open. I replayed the footage from the night before, isolating 3 clips and saving them to a locked drive. Harland and Tatum failing to open the door, the argument that exposed Damon's unemployment, and Harland's admission about the loan and using the house as collateral. I drafted a short email to Reed Fisher, my attorney, attaching the files, only use if they threaten legal action or attempt to smear me. His reply came within minutes. With this, they can't win anything in court. Harland's number flashed on my phone twice before noon. The first voicemail came sharp and venomous. You'll regret this. Hours later, his tone had softened. I just want to talk. I didn't respond. Silence was my only currency now, and I intended to keep it. By mid-afternoon, Jonah's name appeared on my screen with a message. I told them not to mess with you. Sorry I didn't step in sooner. I left it unread, a choice as deliberate as any spoken word. At Austin Storage, I inspected their unit, checking the stacks of boxes and furniture, then adding my own lock to the rolling door. Later, I sent Harland and Tatum a single-line text, the address, the unit number, and the code, nothing else. That evening, an email from the anonymous sender arrived, short, final. They'll try to find a way back in. Don't let them know where you live, keep your distance. The phrasing tugged at a memory from my old startup days, but I let the thought go. Some things didn't need unmasking, everything was in place, evidence secured, finances untouchable, the exit path sealed. I wasn't interested in mediation or second chances. The line was drawn. I closed the laptop, wrapped my hands around a mug of coffee, and looked out past the thin white curtains. Now, I said to the quiet room, this is the real beginning. A week after the house sold, my apartment had taken on the feel of permanence, orderly, spare, sunlight falling across my desk, where sketches for a new app interface filled the screen. The hum of traffic on the street below was softer here, like the city was content to breathe without intruding. My morning started with a walk through Zilker Park, the trails lined with runners, the distant sound of a band rehearsing somewhere in the shade. By noon, I'd stop at Brews and Brews, where Sienna behind the counter greeted me by name and asked the usual. I'd nod, and the ritual would settle into my day like an anchor. The work I'd taken on, a freelance contract for a small Austin startup, was light compared to my old schedule, but it was mine alone. No shared accounts, no silent partners. Midweek, Jonah texted again. They're renting a short-term place. Lake Travis deal fell apart. Damon left town. The message carried no apology, no accusation, just bare facts. That Friday, walking down South Congress, I saw Harland across the street. He was standing in front of a storefront, hands in his pockets. Our eyes met for a moment, long enough to register recognition, but not enough to pull either of us closer. We exchanged a single nod and moved on. That night, I uncorked the Bordeaux 2018, poured a glass, and set my mother's photograph on the table. I did the right thing, I told her. The words landed without the rush of triumph, only the steadiness of knowing the boundaries had held. I felt lighter, not because I'd won, but because the threat to my home, my finances, my peace of mind was gone. Freedom didn't shout. It simply existed. The Bordeaux marked the end of the old chapter. Zilker's morning trails marked the start of the new. The cafe, the walks, the slow construction of a life that was mine, each was a quiet declaration that I wasn't going back. Some lessons stayed with you. Greed could unravel a family, but self-reliance and clear boundaries could keep you whole. Justice wasn't always loud, sometimes it was silence that lasted. I closed my laptop, stepped onto the balcony, and looked out at Austin's lights flickering against the night. A new life, I said to the skyline, written by me. That night, after the last box had been pushed into the corner of my new place, I stood by the window and watched the lights of Austin flicker against the dark sky. The city seemed alive, but in a way that didn't press against me. It breathed around me, not on me. For the first time in months, maybe years, my chest felt light. No footsteps from down the hall to make me tense. No whispers in another room that I couldn't quite hear but knew were about me. No silent accounting of every glance, every locked door, every accidental missing item. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and a cup of coffee cooling in my hands. When I look back at everything that happened, I can see now that the signs had been there for so long. I just didn't want to believe them. Sometimes the people you love most are the ones who sharpen the knife while smiling to your face. I used to think I could fix it, that maybe if I worked harder, gave more, stayed quieter, I could make them see my worth. But the truth, people who measure your value only in what you can give them will never run out of ways to take. The hardest thing I learned wasn't how to set boundaries, it was learning to keep them even when it hurt. Walking away from my father wasn't a clean, proud stride. It was slow, shaky, and full of moments where I wanted to turn back just to hear him say one kind word, but I didn't. And that's why I can stand here now in a place that is mine, without owing my peace of mind to anyone else. If there's anything my story can give you, it's this: pay attention to the small fractures before they become fault lines. Don't wait until someone has you cornered to remember that you can walk away. Your safety, your dignity, your sanity, they are worth more than any property, any relationship, any promise of love that comes with conditions. And if you think you can't start over, I promise you, you can. I learned that justice doesn't always mean dragging someone into court, or winning a loud victory. Sometimes it's as quiet as locking the door for the last time, and walking into a life where they have no keys. It's in knowing you still have your name, your self-respect, and the truth, and that you don't need them to recognize it for it to matter. I'm not here to tell you it was easy. I lost more than a house. I lost a version of myself that still believed every problem could be solved with more patience, more loyalty, more understanding. I lost the illusion that family is always a safe place, but I also found something that makes up for all of it: the certainty that my life is mine, and I will never again hand it over to someone who sees me as an obstacle instead of a person. If you've been in a place like this, if you've had to stand up to someone you thought you'd never have to fight, you're not alone. And if you're still there, wondering whether it's worth it to take that first step out, I'm telling you, it is, even if it's messy, even if it means letting go of the apology you'll never get. Before I go, I want to thank you for listening to me. Stories like this aren't easy to tell, but knowing someone out there might hear it and feel less alone makes all the difference. If you felt something in my words, if they reminded you of your own strength, or gave you the push to protect yourself, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel, not because numbers matter, but because maybe one day you'll need another reminder, another story that tells you it's okay to choose yourself. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me here. Let's build a place where stories like ours aren't whispered in secret, but spoken out loud without shame, where the people who've been through storms can stand together and say, "We made it out." This isn't just the end of my story, it's the beginning of the next chapter, and maybe if you're ready, it can be the beginning of yours.